Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my AM reading video for Friday, June 25th, 2021. Possibly going up on a Saturday because, as usual, I'm filming late. But I got some stuff to talk about, starting as I have these past several weeks with a story from this collection. I started this in May for Jewish American Heritage Month / Short Story Month. This is Dorothy Parker's collection. I was talking about finishing it this month, but now I'm wondering if I'll just finish it in July instead. I mean, by the rate I'm going in this, I will be finishing it in July of next year. But I was intending to, do a mad dash finish at the end of this month to finish all of the collection's stories I haven't read yet. But then I thought, in July, it's my birthday month, and I actually plan to read a lot of short stories, as I often do in July. So I thought, it still fits the bill to keep going with this. So I might be continuing to hold this up at the beginning of my Friday Reads videos. This story I read for this week, Dialogue at 3 in the Morning, published in 1926, is one of the short ones. A reason why it takes forever to get through this. It's just 2 pages long. It's a interaction between 2 people, a woman in a peacock hat and a man with like blue tinted hair. That's their descriptors. And it's very much sort of a mini psychology lesson, I guess, about interactions where they're buffered by the waiter, getting their drink order, and then they get it at the very end. But their interaction is the woman feeling very affronted and going on a tear, basically, about how disrespected she is, basically. Like, she talked about, a friend calling her fat in her dress and how hard she works, and, just going off on tears, and the man is trying to sort of interject every now and then to say something like, oh, now listen, or, it almost sounds like he really does want to be on her side, but she's just so, defensive and unhappy that she just goes off on these tears. And the language is a little, I don't know, there's like a lot of, sees and nows, and it almost like makes me think of, some sort of old-timey newscaster sort of, now see here! I don't know, I'd probably put that in on her, but there's something comical, obviously, about out-of-context, beleaguered talking where the, the partner can't get anything in. So that's the slice of life, and also the title, of course, I guess also makes people think of what exactly could be going on in public at 3 in the morning. The first book I finished this month is The Layover by Lacie Walden, which I've been talking about in several videos. Lacie Walden and I are part of a writing group together, and so her book just came out last week, and I wanted to read it, as soon as it came out, and I'm so glad I did. This is a really fun, breezy romance, and it was just such a breath of fresh air to read her wonderful, witty writing again. Obviously I'm biased. I really, I like her as a person, but I also really like this book as well. I think people would like this book. I do. I don't even read a lot of romance. I'm sitting here thinking, now that I've returned to my self-serious reading that you'll hear about in a bit, about how, there's not a lot of major issues at play here. This is very much about, characters living very, self-involved lives. We're not talking about big, worldly issues at all. But there's a lot of heart in this. It is a rom-com about a flight attendant, or 2 flight attendants actually, but the main character is a flight attendant, Ava Green. She's about to leave her job for a fiancé and a marriage, although from the off you can tell that maybe that's not meant to be, and that she's sacrificing something in her job that she doesn't want to entirely. And she's on this layover in Belize with a co-worker, Jack, with whom she has really negative feelings based off of events from their past and hearsay and that sort of thing. But of course this is a rom-com, and a lot of her opinions might be tested in this. There's also other minor characters. Everyone just is really fun, or funny if they're not fun. Like the captain is, the pilot is not, the main pilot is not a fun guy, but he's funny. And there's a lot of heart in this, even though it's obviously meant to be a beach read, something really fun. But, Ava still is a fleshed out character who has to deal with the fact of not trying to come to terms with who she is and what she wants out of her life, and that maybe, you know, what she thought was the truth about what she should want isn't the actual truth about what she should want, and what, you know, makes her feel like a good and full and complete person. All told in a much more fun and witty and less self-serious manner than I'm making it out to be. But still, there's a lot of heart and introspection in something that's, you know, a beach read. And that might just be my snobbishness coming into play, like, oh my gosh, you know, a romance can, you know, be deep. And so, yeah, there's just so much to recommend this. And of course, there's also the wanderlust in this, which, you know, now that we've all been quarantined forever, I think even I, who am terrified of so many things that Ava does, you know, just putting herself out there in the world, it feels all the more special and amazing to think that we could, you know, go out on these grand adventures in exotic locations now, maybe, hopefully, soon. So there's just so much to recommend this, and it was such a wonderful read, and I was just so impressed, and I loved that this was her debut into the world of writing, that she wrote such a compelling and fully fleshed out story like this. So huzzah, huzzah, Lacie. The next book I finished this month is This Beautiful Life by Helen Shulman. This is the first self-serious book to talk about. This is a book I've had on my Goodreads TBR since 2016, so it's a goal of mine to knock those off this year. This is a book about the Bergamot family. They are an upper middle class family that's just moved to Manhattan because the father's gotten a really glamorous job in the university field. Executive field, and the kids are now in private school, and you know, they're just getting used to this glitzy new life. It takes place in 2003, and their oldest son Jake ends up in a sex scandal, as it were. He is at a party one night, and this younger kid, Daisy, is hitting on him and obviously desperate to make an impression. She sends him a video, a very explicit video of herself, and he's overwhelmed by this, and he forwards it to a friend, basically thoughtlessly for advice, and then of course the friend forwards it, and it keeps forwarding and forwarding until it is, you know, ubiquitous online, and that, you know, people are forwarding it back to Jake, not knowing he was the one who started it, and it ends up on a porno site, and, you know, it's a pretty big deal. And so the family kind of collapses from there. We're, you know, still focused on the Bergamots. Jake is suspended, and then they have to go get a lawyer to, you know, get him back into school. It's a private school, I guess, a way to sort of subvert getting, you know, the government too involved in this, I guess. And the father's job is in jeopardy. The mother is basically traumatized by what happened. It seems she like loses a friend, and there's some, you know, some news coverage. Although I feel like with the mother, Lizzie, Schulman was trying to talk about this sex scandal, you know, in, you know, the early days of the internet, before I think adults really knew how bad the internet could be for, you know, what could once be very contained in terms of teenage mistakes, you know, because both Daisy and Jake are innocent about, you know, it wasn't anything malicious about this. It was just like an innocent mistake that sort of spiraled out of control. And in 2003, that was, I think, the time when before people really knew how bad it could be, how bad the internet could make things, but, you know, FYI, it could. But another thing I think Schulman was really trying to do in this was to talk about the vapidness of this upper middle class and upper class Manhattan life. So I feel like that's where Lizzie's story was really centered, you know, about how unhappy she was in this change, and she ultimately ends up leaving, well, not necessarily leaving the marriage entirely, but, you know, the marriage goes through a big change. I feel like I'm definitely spoiling things a little here. And I think that's interesting, but there wasn't enough of her reaction to what was going on with Jake. I feel like the book could have been longer. It's only like 222 pages, and, you know, a lot of books like this could be up to 350 pages and, you know, be fine. And I felt like we needed more of her reacting to this actual issue with her son, which was another, you know, big part of the story. I also felt like we needed more of Richard, the father, with Jake. I think too much was happening inside their own heads. I felt like Richard's life, as, you know, how he saw himself as a man who built himself up and what he felt he owed, you know, his professional career and his family. That was built up, but not so much his reaction to what happened with Jake. You know, it was both Lizzie and him and his reactions, I think they were a little too told, not shown sort of stuff. There's some stuff in here I just didn't necessarily agree with. You know, Daisy was lauded as like a celebrity by her classmates, which I definitely don't think ever would have happened. Nobody ever would have treated her with anything but, you know, mocking, slut shaming. That's not how sex scandals work, even if, you know, there's a lot of, another of Schulman's critiques is how sexualized society is nowadays, but that doesn't mean that, you know, the slut shaming would stop. It wouldn't. And I also feel like the ending, you know, which fast forwards into the future, because this was written in 2010, so I guess she felt like she needed to go into 2010. I don't know, it felt a little too tacked on, especially for Jake. I kind of like that Daisy got to have the epilogue, because, you know, she's, you know, the traditional victim of this, you know, the girl who becomes, you know, ostracized by the sex act is the traditional victim of sex scandals. So I like that we got to hear from her as a young adult in the epilogue. But it also made me sad because I feel like really the big moral of the story is that nobody handled any of this correctly, and it really toppled a lot of people's lives because of that, or especially Jake's life and Daisy's life. As for Richard and Lizzie, I feel like their marriage was on sort of a different track altogether and was kind of headed toward a bad place, and the scandal just sort of exacerbated things. Although apparently I might be in a minority opinion. I ended up listening to the Slate audio podcast, which did a sort of a book club session about this book, you know, 10 years ago when it was published, and I think a lot of those people had different opinions about the marriage and other things, so I'll link that down below. So I'm in a weird place with this. I feel like a lot of it was frustrated with, that I didn't think it was fleshed out enough or believable aspects, but I think it also made me think and debate a lot too, and I really liked that, and I thought the characters were at least well drawn in some aspects, if not all aspects. So yeah, it was an interesting read. The next book I finished is also self-serious in a different way, or a different genre anyway. This is The Jasmine Throne, if it'll show up here, the audiobook by Tasha Suri. I put it on my list of adult fantasy that I wanted to read for the Goodreads Choice Awards this year. I think it came out just a week before Lacey's book, so I was lucky to get it on audio as quickly as I did. It's an epic fantasy based off of Indian myths and epics in history, I guess. It's about colonialism. We primarily follow two young women. We follow Priya, who she's a member of the oppressed state. The empire is made up of city-states, and hers is oppressed by the empire. And she has a secret past having to do with the temple where the Princess Malini is being kept prisoner by her dictator brother for not taking part in a death cult ritual. He apparently isn't so fond of his sister. He's a bit of the bad guy in the distance. We see him a little in the prologue and epilogue, but for the most part, we are in this remote city-state of Aryanya, dealing with unrest because of colonial rule, and the entire novel really is very much a criticism of colonialism and of patriarchy, but it's fleshed out. You know, this is the thing about I think a lot of adult fantasy that isn't so much there as much in YA fantasy is really giving a lot more due to the world building and to the thematic elements and not just the characters. And you know, the Bildungsroman of YA characters usually. I don't think Malini and Priya are so much on a Bildungsroman. They have their own, you know, personal agendas, but they also really factor into the broader politics and the broader cultures. There's also a lot of other characters who become POVs, which also fleshes out the world and makes it seem bigger than one person's story. I think a couple of the characters Suri didn't need to include, like, one-off, I'm just in this to, die at the end of my chapter, random soldier character sort of thing. But most of the characters I really appreciated getting various sides of, both of the Imperial side and also the people being oppressed, and we have people trying to work with the imperialists, and also people who are violently rising up against the imperial seat. I liked it a lot. I think it was primarily Priya's story. Like, she was the one who went through the most personal change of, she started by hiding her identity, and then she was able to really come into it. So I guess in a way that is sort of a Bildungsroman for her, and it really plays into a lot of fun, fantastical elements because I come to fantasy for fantasy. I also think Malini grew a little bit as well. Like, she was a scheming politician sort of character, but she and Priya became very close, so she had to sort of open up emotionally at least a little bit. She's also a very angry and violent character, and I guess that's one of the things in this story that gives me a little pause is how much of violence is Suri condoning in her story. Although, going back to the rebel uprisers, I think there's a little bit of side-eye given to their behavior, so there is that. I mean, it's a complicated story. I don't think I fell head over heels for it as much as I hoped I would, although I think it also, in my head, was living up to really high expectations. I was excited to give this author a try, that, that it was an adult novel, but it also played into these cultural elements that I thought would be really exciting, and I feel like I built it up so much that maybe that's part of the reason, I didn't, fall absolutely in love with it. But I'm quibbling here. I've really liked it. I'm looking forward to the next book. I definitely think I'll be reading that. For now, I better return the audiobook ASAP, because I'm pretty sure there's some people waiting in line behind me for that. As for books I'm in the middle of, well, this is one reason I'm glad I'm filming so late, because I was able to just sign on to YouTube and my subscriptions, and I saw that Sean the Book Maniac held up this very same book in his Friday reads. But anyway, this is CANTORAS by Carolina de Robertis. And I am specifically picking this up now because back in 2019, it won the Reading Women Award. The Reading Women Award is put on by the Reading Women podcast, which is run by another booktuber, Kendra Winchester, and her friend Autumn Privet. And for the past few years, I've been trying to keep up with their winners that they announce yearly in fiction and nonfiction. I am, a little bit behind, but I'm still making steady progress. So this was the fiction winner for 2019. This is a novel that takes place in Uruguay between a group of 5 friends, lesbian friends. It takes place during Uruguay's military regime, like a very suppressive government in the 1970s and 1980s. So this group of friends, among other things, are all lesbians, which is something that the regime would not be fond of. And so they're trying to keep their heads down and, live, without incurring too much trouble. Although one of the characters, Romina, has been, before the story starts, she was arrested and, had taken, to a secret jail and tortured for a few days, sexually assaulted before she was let go, because she and her brother were part of a communist movement, and this regime is anti-communist. Her brother is now in jail somewhere. And the other women, one of them is a butcher's daughter who is actually taking on her father's mantle. He doesn't have any sons, so she's kind of doing it. She's sort of the most brash character, I guess, because she has the most freedom in a way, because her parents seem very tolerant or accepting even, whereas the other family members of the other women are not so much. There's Paz, who's the youngest. She's 16 and she has a sort of a disapproving mother. There's Anita, also known as La Venus, and she's married to a bureaucrat and very dour man who not happily married, into women. And then there's Milena, who is the most secretive. She's being written as the most, secretive character, although we do know she has some history in a nunnery. This is all stuff that happens in, well, part 1 at least. Hopefully I'm not giving too much away from the 150 pages I've read. Plot-wise, what they do is they actually end up going to this remote island, just thinking they could get away for a week, just to be away from the regime, from the dictatorship. And they decide that they're going to go and buy a fisherman's hut on this island and, be able to, sneak back to it for a little bit of freedom whenever they can have it. But, very shortly after they buy the hut, the regime basically follows them there and puts, soldiers in positions of power to basically watch over the Uruguayans who live on this island. So it's not so easy to escape this oppressiveness they're finding out. So yeah, I mean, it's compelling. I feel like it took me a little while to get into this. Part of it, I think, has to do with the fact that I was juggling a few books at once and, trying to finish and review things and start things and yada yada. I think part of it, too, is the specific lyrical writing I wasn't as used to, but I'm definitely more into it now. Obviously there's a lot of plot elements that keep this compelling, like, there's constant danger in the background. We're talking about a Big Brother watching sort of atmosphere here, but also the characters are also well drawn with a lot of history behind them. Romina, in fact, is Jewish, and her parents and grandparents escaped from pogroms in Russia and the Ukraine, which in fact gives this book more Jewish content than This Beautiful Life, which I put as Jewish on Goodreads because technically the family is nominally Jewish, but Romina actually talks more about her Jewish heritage in this book, and I'm just putting this on Goodreads as fiction. Don't ask me to explain myself, I can do what I want. So yeah, that's basically where I am right now. I'm pretty hopeful that I'll continue to like this book, as fraught as it is. It could, have a pretty depressing ending, really, given the broader politics, but the characters are, engaging. You can't help but want the best for them. I'll definitely have to check back in with Sean's videos next week to see if he bailed on this or not, because that's his MO, obviously, but I'll hope that we'll both enjoy this to the end. And finally, next on my docket, I have the final Jewish-themed book I put on Goodreads in 2016. This is A Dual Inheritance by Joanna Herschen, which I actually picked up last year, I believe, for my page 112 tag, but didn't end up going through with reading it. So it makes me extra excited that I can finally, kick this off the list now. I remember I really did like that page. I'll link to that video down below. And for now, I'll read from the flap. From accomplished author Joanna Herschen comes an engrossing new novel of passion, friendship, betrayal, and class, and their reverberations across 3 generations. Autumn 1862. Ed Kantowitz and Hugh Shipley meet in their final year at Harvard. Ed is far removed from Hugh's privileged upbringing as a Boston Brahmin, yet his drive and ambition outpace Hugh's ambivalence about his own life. These 2 young men form an unlikely friendship, bolstered by a fierce shared desire to transcend their circumstances. But in just a few short years, not only do their paths diverge, one rising on Wall Street, the other becoming a kind of global humanitarian, but their friendship ends abruptly, with only one of them understanding why. Can a close friendship define one's view of the world? Spanning from the Cuban Missile Crisis to the current-day stock market collapse, with locations as diverse as Dar es Salaam, Boston, Shenzhen, and Fisher's Island, A Dual Inheritance asks this question as it follows not only these 2 men, but the complicated women in their vastly different lives. As Ed and Hugh grow farther and farther apart, they remain uniquely, even surprisingly, connected. So yeah, there's a lot in this that I really love. I love intergenerational stories. I guess in a lot of ways it's a little like epic fantasy where the world seems really big, so there's a great canvas to talk about these great issues about how friendship affects people and their families around them, and how it's impacted by history, perhaps. I don't know how much the history that was mentioned in this will play into the actual narrative, but it's certainly long enough to do so, so I'll be looking forward to getting to this. So that about covers it for me now, desperately hoping I'm still talking to a live camera because my battery is in the last throes of life here. So I will just try to quickly say that this weekend I'll be returning to Baltimore to my parents' house because my aunt and uncle will be here, but I can only see them for a little bit on Saturday evening and Sunday morning, because Sunday afternoon I'll have to come back to DC and get this book signed, because Lacey's finally having her DC book launch sort of picnicky party in a park in Capitol Hill, so huzzah. And speaking of publications, I have my own surprise one that just happened that I talked about in my last video, my book haul. This is Fault Lines, Exploring the Complicated Place of Progressive American Jewish Zionism. This book is put out by Rabbi Menachem Creditor and Amanda Berman, who is the executive director of a nonprofit that I follow called Zionists. So this is very much about the intersection of Zionism and progressive Jews, of which I am. So I'll also link to more information about this down below. But it's certainly a nice way to enter the weekend and talk to people I haven't seen in a while to say, you know, I did this thing. It's pretty cool. I will be back on this channel in the next few days to do my mid-year check-in freakout tag. I've been seeing more and more of those crop up as we get to the end of June here. They're always fun videos to watch. I'm enjoying searching for those videos myself these past few days. So, huzzah. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. And I'll see you next time.